The story of volunteerism and the United Nations volunteers in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, volunteerism has always had a rich history, as it is embedded in the culture and forms part of the social fabric as evidenced in the Mahavansa, or the Great Chronicle, which is a historical record that describes Sri Lanka's ancient history. Volunteerism in Sri Lanka is commonly known as Shramadana and has been embedded in the cultural heritage for many generations. The early forms of volunteer organizations were known as Vava Sabha or Dayaka Sabha. Around the 20th century, volunteerism in Sri Lanka began to evolve, with a shift in focus from charity work to being more development-oriented work, providing opportunities for volunteering. Today, with an average of 7 million people volunteering their time, Sri Lanka was ranked number 1 in the world in 2019 for the highest rate of volunteering and is among the top 10 countries in the world over the 10-year aggregate, according to the World Giving Index. In 2018, the government of Sri Lanka highlighted the impact of volunteerism in the Voluntary National Reviews, or VNR, of the SDGs. Yet volunteering remains a largely untapped resource with a huge potential to achieve a people-centric and socially inclusive sustainable development. Volunteers in Sri Lanka are supported and engaged by a diversity of organizations. Among these organizations, the United Nations Volunteers, or UNV, is in the forefront and enjoys a unique global mandate to promote the value and global recognition of volunteerism. Since 1974, UNV Sri Lanka has continued to support the United Nations system by mobilizing a diversity of UN volunteers. The UN General Assembly declared 2001 the International Year of Volunteers and designated UNV to lead the campaign. 2011, the 10th anniversary of the International Year of Volunteers, IYV plus 10, was a milestone for Sri Lanka. The National Steering Committee on Volunteering was established to guide and lead volunteerism in the country. The same year, UNV Sri Lanka launched 2 flagship initiatives, V Awards and V Force. V Awards is a national-level initiative to recognize and honor volunteers who make extraordinary and selfless contributions to society. V Force is a platform providing individuals with volunteer opportunities within the United Nations. UNV champions environments in which volunteerism can flourish by engaging with the government and other stakeholders. In Sri Lanka, UNV supported the development of a national policy on volunteering and is among the few countries in Asia to have a separate policy on volunteering. The country also has a coordinating body for volunteering, established with the support of UNV. This is the National Volunteering Secretariat. Volunteering practices are changing in response to wider social patterns and challenges. At a time when the world is in the grip of a pandemic that underscores our common humanity, volunteers in Sri Lanka and globally are demonstrating the critical importance of joining together to tackle the challenges of our time. It is important to fully harness the power of volunteering, and UN volunteers are among those engaged to support the UN system and the government in recovery efforts in the country. In 2018, the GA formally adopted the resolution on volunteering for the 2030 Agenda for SDGs, where volunteer groups are explicitly recognized as stakeholders. The plan of action to integrate volunteering into the 2030 Agenda recognized the role of volunteering as a key driver towards SDG acceleration efforts. Volunteering gives people the opportunity to directly contribute to sustainable development, enabling them to take charge of their own futures, strengthening social cohesion, solidarity and trust by promoting individual and collective action. Volunteering is well positioned to contribute to campaigns such as the Decade of Action, which aims to speed up and scale up efforts to achieve the SDGs through individual and collective action, both locally and globally, owned and implemented by everyone, and leaving no one behind. Looking ahead, UNV Sri Lanka aspires to celebrate the spirit of all forms of volunteering and recognize contributions and efforts by volunteers through a reimagined volunteering to the 2030 agenda throughout the decade of action. UNV Sri Lanka stands ready to work with governments and partners to position voluntary actions of all people, everywhere, at the heart of efforts to achieve a shared future for people and planet.